The alarm rings. Before your feet touch the floor, the clock starts. You're not just waking up, you're logging in. Meetings, tasks, deadlines, messages. You wake up feeling like you're already behind, like you owe the world time that you haven't even spent yet. That anxiety, that feeling that you're a machine running slightly too low, it's not part of your personality. It was engineered. In 1911, there was a man who decided to turn humans into units. And today I want to show you how he did it to you. This wasn't a vague cultural shift. It had a name and it had a tool. The story of this guy illustrates it. People say that Frederick Winslow Taylor didn't look at workers and see people. They say he saw waste. He would stand over men in factories with a stopwatch. He didn't ask how the work felt. He didn't ask what the worker thought. He timed them. Lift, turn, step. If you took 3 seconds to lift a shovel, you were a bad unit. If it took 2 seconds, you were a good one. This was called scientific management. Later, it would simply be called Taylorism. And it worked. Factories produced more, costs went down, output became predictable. But to make the math work, something had to be erased. The worker's inner life. Judgment, that became inefficiency. Conversation, that was considered waste. And rest became laziness. The human being was no longer the subject of work. They were considered a variable, a unit of output. Once you accept that work can be engineered, you start engineering people. Skill then becomes obedience. Experience becomes speed. And thinking becomes error. And anything that can't be measured, like fatigue, pride, boredom, meaning, is treated as irrelevant. Now, this was never sold as cruelty. It was sold as progress. Efficiency wasn't just practical, it became considered good. And inefficiency wasn't just like inconvenient, it became wrong. That moral shift matters because once efficiency becomes like a virtue, anything human that slows the system down starts to look like a defect. Now here's where this idea reached almost everyone. School, think about it. Bells telling you when to start and stop. Rows of desks, batch processing by age, standardized testing, uniform pacing. You weren't learning as an individual. You were moving through a system, 1 unit per desk, 1 hour per subject, 1 score per student. Curiosity slowed that schedule down. Daydreaming was non-compliance, and restlessness, that was pathology. The modern school system wasn't designed to shape meaning. It was designed to produce reliable outputs. That's why so many people have felt intelligent outside school and inadequate inside it. It wasn't because they were incapable, but because they were being measured by factory logic applied to human development. This is where unit thinking stopped being theory. It became personal. Once the unit model worked in factories and schools, it spread everywhere. Healthcare, it measured throughput. Governments modeled populations, and economics reduced value to productivity. Time became something you spent or you wasted, and eventually you internalized it. You stopped asking, was this meaningful? And instead started asking, was this efficient? Life became something to manage, not something to live. Here's the problem. Humans don't experience life in units. A single conversation can outweigh an entire day of tasks. A moment of grief, that can erase your sense of time completely. How about a moral decision? That can exhaust you more than physical labor ever could. But systems built on efficiency, they don't recognize that. They treat every hour as equal, every person as replaceable, every pause as waste. And when you fail to behave like a unit, like when you rest, hesitate, or resist, the system doesn't question itself. It turns the blame to you. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt guilty for resting? Be honest in the comments. The guilt isn't yours. It's in the system. Now, if this is landing a little bit heavy and you want a place to steady yourself afterward, I've made a short audio series called Steady. No visuals, no instructions. Just a calm voice reminding you that you are no accident. The link's below. The unit logic didn't disappear. It became invisible. Because algorithms now optimize for labor, platforms rank for attention, people are scored, sorted, nudged, and tracked. Now it all kind of feels normal because we've been living inside the unit model for over a century. But here's what systems can't escape. You cannot reduce human beings to output without destroying the very things that make societies work. Things like trust, responsibility, conscience, meaning. They don't scale cleanly, they don't automate, and they don't behave like machine parts. Taylorism turned you into a unit at work. But what happens when a government decides to treat you like a unit, not just in a factory, but in your soul? What happens when efficiency becomes the only morality that the state allows? I have an answer to that. I once spent a day in a Chinese prison for using a word that the system couldn't calculate. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you that story, and I'm going to show you what happens when the machine tries to process a soul.